The moment my marriage died, I finally came back to life. I am Sarah Thompson. For years, I played the part of the perfect wife, ignoring my own instincts, my own brilliance, all for a man who saw me as a disappointment. The day he brought his mistress into our home was the day he handed me a declaration of war. He thought the fight was over, but my fight had just begun. I decided I would take not just his money, but his company, his legacy, everything he held dear. This wasn't just revenge. It was a reckoning. They call me the Phoenix of Wall Street now. And now, here is my story. The crystal chandelier cast dancing shadows across our dining room as I arranged the last of the autumn centerpieces. Thanksgiving was tomorrow, and everything had to be perfect. It always had to be perfect in the Harrison household. I stepped back to admire the table-setting Hermes china, Waterford crystal, and enough silverware to feed a small army. 6 years of marriage had taught me that appearances mattered more than authenticity in Jack's world. Our world, I corrected myself, though the distinction felt increasingly hollow. "Mommy, can I help?" 8-year-old Emily tugged at my cashmere sweater, her bright eyes so much like mine before I learned to dim them for the sake of domestic harmony. "Of course, sweetheart." I handed her the cloth napkins, each one pressed to perfection by our housekeeper. "Just fold them like I showed you." Grace and Chloe bounded into the room, their laughter echoing off the high ceilings of our Upper East Side penthouse. 6 and 4 years old, respectively, they still believed in fairy tales and happy endings. I envied them that innocence. "Where's Daddy?" Grace asked, climbing onto one of the dining chairs despite my gentle protests about her school uniform. Where indeed? I glanced at my Cartier watch, a wedding gift from happier times. 7:30 p.m., and Jack still wasn't home. Again. "He's working late, baby. You know how important Daddy's job is." The lie tasted bitter on my tongue. But what was I supposed to tell them? That their father had been coming home later and later, that his kisses had become perfunctory pecks, that he looked at me like I was a disappointment he couldn't quite shake? The sound of heels clicking against marble announced the arrival of Elizabeth Harrison, Jack's mother. She swept into the room like a queen surveying her domain, her silver hair perfectly coiffed, her Chanel suit impeccable despite her 72 years. "Sarah, dear." Her smile was as cold as the November wind outside. "Still, no word from Jackson?" "He'll be here soon," I replied, smoothing down my skirt. Even after 6 years, Elizabeth still made me feel like I was auditioning for a role I'd never quite master. She surveyed the table with a critical eye. "Lovely as always, though I do wonder." She paused, her gaze lingering on my daughters. "When you might finally give this family what it truly needs." The unspoken words hung in the air like a toxic cloud. A son, an heir, a male child to carry on the Harrison name and legacy. I felt the familiar tightness in my chest, the same suffocating sensation I'd experienced every month for the past 3 years, when my period arrived like clockwork. Each cycle another reminder of my apparent failure as a wife. "The girls are wonderful," I said quietly, my hand instinctively moving to Emily's shoulder. "They're smart, talented, beautiful." "Of course they are," Elizabeth interrupted with a wave of her manicured hand. "But they're not boys, are they? The Harrison legacy needs—" "Grandma Lizzie," Emily interrupted, oblivious to the tension. "Look how I folded the napkins." Elizabeth's expression softened marginally as she examined Emily's work. "Very nice, darling, though perhaps a bit more precision next time." Even my 8-year-old wasn't immune to the Harrison standards of perfection. The sound of keys in the lock made us all turn toward the foyer. Jack's voice carried through the apartment, but he wasn't alone. I could hear another voice lighter, younger, distinctly female. "Just need to grab some documents from my study," Jack was saying. My heart began to race. In 6 years of marriage, Jack had never brought anyone home unannounced, especially not at this hour. "Sarah?" Jack appeared in the doorway, his tall frame filling the space. At 34, he was still devastatingly handsome, the kind of man who commanded attention when he walked into a room. His dark hair was slightly mussed, his tie loosened, and there was something in his blue eyes I couldn't quite place. Guilt? Defiance? Behind him stood a woman I recognized from the society pages, Amanda Whitney, daughter of Senator Whitney, socialite extraordinaire, and at 25, everything I used to be before I became a wife and mother. Amanda needed some files for tomorrow's meeting, Jack explained, his voice carefully neutral. I hope you don't mind. Mind? I was standing in my own home, surrounded by my children and mother-in-law, watching my husband bring another woman into our private space. Of course I minded. But Sarah Harrisonth, perfect wife, the accommodating hostess, would never make a scene. Of course not, I heard myself say. Can I get you anything? Coffee? Wine? Amanda's smile was predatory. How thoughtful. Jack's told me so much about you. Had he? I wondered what version of me existed in their conversations. The Stanford MBA who'd given up her career? The woman who'd supported him through his early struggles on Wall Street? Or simply the wife who couldn't give him a son? Mommy, who's the pretty lady? Chloe asked with 4-year-old directness. This is Amanda, I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil in my chest. She works with Daddy. Oh, Chloe studied Amanda with the intense curiosity of a child. Are you married? Not yet, Amanda replied, her eyes flicking to Jack. But I'm very optimistic about the future. The words hit me like a physical blow. I saw Elizabeth's sharp intake of breath, noticed how Jack's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. This wasn't just about business files. Girls, why don't you go get ready for bed? I managed to say. Daddy and I need to talk to Amanda. But it's not even 8 o'clock, Grace protested. Go, I said more firmly, now. Elizabeth, reading the room with the skill of a seasoned socialite, gathered her purse. I should be going as well. Jackson, we'll speak tomorrow. As the room emptied, leaving just the three of us, I felt the last vestiges of my perfect life crumbling around me. Jack couldn't even look at me directly, and Amanda. Amanda looked like a woman who'd already won a war I didn't even know I was fighting. The files are in my study, Jack said finally, his voice strained. It'll just take a minute. They disappeared down the hallway, leaving me alone with the perfectly set table and the crushing realization that my marriage-me entire life was built on foundations far more fragile than I'd ever imagined. I sank into one of the dining chairs, my hands trembling as I stared at the reflection of the chandelier in the polished mahogany. Somewhere in the distance, I could hear muffled voices from Jack's study, too low to make out words, but intimate enough to confirm my worst fears. The woman I'd been, the Stanford MBA, the ambitious young professional who'd once commanded boardrooms, stirred somewhere deep inside me. She'd been dormant for so long, buried under years of school pickups and charity galas and the relentless pursuit of being the perfect Harrison wife. But she was still there, waiting. And, for the first time in years, I wondered what would happen if I let her out. I didn't sleep that night after Jack and Amanda left together. I noticed I sat in my study staring at the framed photo of our wedding day. We looked so young, so hopeful. Jack's eyes had held genuine love then, and I had been radiant with the confidence of a woman who believed she could have it all. How naive I'd been. The morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of our penthouse, illuminating the dust motes that danced in the air like tiny weightless dreams. I'd been awake since 3 a.m., my mind racing with questions. I wasn't sure I wanted answered. Jack had come home around midnight, slipping into bed beside me with the practiced quiet of a man who'd done this before. He'd smelled like expensive perfuminat Minanand when I pretended to stir in my sleep. He'd frozen like a guilty child now. As I watched him get ready for work, I studied his face in the bathroom mirror. When had the lines around his eyes deepened? When had his smile become so calculated, so distant? You're up early, he said, not quite meeting my eyes as he adjusted his tie. Couldn't sleep. I leaned against the doorframe, my silk robe wrapped tightly around me, thinking about last night, his hands stilled on his tie. What about it? Amanda seems nice. The word hung between us, loaded with everything. I couldn't bring myself to say directly. Jack's reflection looked back at me, and for a moment I saw a flicker of the man I'd married, vulnerable, uncertain, almost apologetic. Then it was gone. She's a valuable asset to the company, he said, his voice carefully professional. The Whitney connection opens doors. I'm sure it does. I turned away before he could see the tears threatening to spill. I'll be at Emily's school play this afternoon. Will you make it? I'll try. Another lie. We both knew he wouldn't be there. Just like he'd missed Grace's dance recital last month, and Chloe's parent-teacher conference the week before. After he left, I found myself in his study, drawn by an impulse I couldn't name. The room smelled like his cologne and leather, filled with the trappings of his Success Awards photos, with politicians and celebrities, first edition books he'd never read. His laptop sat open on the desk, the screen dark but not locked. Jack had always been careless with technology, secure in his assumption that I was too trusting, too naive to invade his privacy. The Stanford MBA in Myth woman, who'd graduated summa cum laude, who'd once been recruited by Goldman Sachs, knew exactly what she was looking for. I touched the trackpad, and the screen came to life. His email was open, and there it was, a thread of messages between Jack and Amanda that made my blood run cold. Not just business correspondence, but intimate exchanges that painted a picture of an affair that had been going on for months. "Can't wait to be free of this charade," Jack had written just 2 days ago. "She's a good mother, but that's all she is anymore. I need a woman who can match my ambition, not someone who's content to play house." Amanda's response was even more cutting. "Poor little Sarah. Does she have any idea what's coming? Though I suppose it's better this way, she'll never have to pretend to be something she's not anymore." The words blurred as tears filled my eyes, but it was the next exchange that truly broke me. "The girls will adjust," Jack had written. "And honestly, maybe it's better they don't have her as a role model. I want them to grow up knowing they can be more than just wives and mothers." "What about the inheritance issue?" Amanda had replied. "Your mother won't be happy about the girls not carrying on the Harrison name. That's why we need to move quickly. Once we're married, we can have the son this family needs." Sarah had her chance. I stared at the screen until the words burned themselves into my memory. Then, with shaking hands, I forwarded the entire thread to my personal email before deleting the sent message from Jack's account. The woman I'd been for the past 6 years, accommodating, trusting, desperate to please. I walked to the window and looked out at the city sprawling below. Somewhere out there was the life I'd abandoned for love, the career I'd sacrificed for family, the dreams I'd shelved for the sake of being the perfect wife. Jack thought I was just a good mother, nothing more. He thought I was content to play house while he built his empire and planned his future with another woman. He was about to learn how wrong he was, but first I had a school play to attend. Because whatever else happened, whatever I decided to do next, my daughters would always know that their mother showed up for them, even when their father didn't.